part of being married for 40 years later this month is learning to do what I'm told. So, hello, my dear friends. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you today. This is my first inside talk since COVID began. So it's a very great day for me. We did one outside talk at the parking lot of the Unity Church in Cedar Rapids, but this is the first real live indoor talk. So the title of today's talk is Being Committed to the Cause but Not Attached. Is that the word? Overly attached to the results. And this is something I think that every one of us can relate to. Whatever the cause is in our lives that is so important to us. You may recall, if you were here when I was last here, that my passion is climate justice. And I've been arrested. The FBI has a file on me. I've been at this for many years. I was part of the steering team for the Bakken Pipeline Resistance Coalition in Iowa. And there's been a lot of losses, a lot of failures. Almost total list on that side of the ledger. So in order for me to continue, I have sought the wisdom of great activists like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., like Mahatma Gandhi, like there's a woman named Vandana Shiva that you may have read about. She's a well-known international environmental activist. Because you get worn down, no matter what it is you're committed to. If you encounter resistance and failure over and over and over again, if you're human, you can tend to run out of gas. And we can't afford to run out of gas, no matter what it is that is important to each one of us. It could be a world cause, it could be feeding the hungry locally, it could be continuing to build a successful business or a successful relationship with a partner. Raising children can be tremendously challenging. So whatever it is that we are committed to, it is so critically important that we don't run out of gas. So Vandana Shiva, when she was asked, how can you continue? How can you continue all of these years fighting the good fight when what you encounter is resistance and corruption and failure over and over again? And her answer was pretty simple. She said, I stay focused on giving what I can give, and I leave the results to God. Now, if you don't hold that there is some supreme being somewhere, as she does, we could say that we leave the results up to nature or to whatever forces are out there deciding what the results are going to be. I give my best, I stay focused on the job at hand, and then I let go. How's that? That's universal. I let go and let the chips fall where they may. My dad might have used some such phrase. So how do we do that? That's the question, right? How do we stay committed with all of our hearts to something worthwhile and yet not be overly attached to the outcome. I believe this month our community here is focused on nonviolence. Isn't that part of our theme? Yes. Deborah says yes. I remember years ago when the Iraq War first broke out, and I was living in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area at the time. So was my daughter, my grown daughter, and my mom. That's where I grew up. So my maybe 85 years old at that time, mom, my 19-year-old daughter, and I went to this peace march in San Francisco. And, you know, the mood was positive. People had signs, you know, no war, you know, make love, not war, and the kinds of signs we could expect from San Francisco. And we marched along, maybe for a couple miles slowly, with many, many thousands of people, many thousands. And then we got to Union Square, where they had the speeches, you know, set up, all that. And I remember, as we came close enough to hear, there was a woman at the mic, and she was just spewing venom and anger, screaming, condemning, but in a clearly violent way. The energy was violent. Even though she wasn't performing any kind of violent act, the energy was violent. And the first thought I had was, doesn't this person make the connection between that kind of energy and the manifestation of war in our world? Because the truth is, all of us contribute to a collective consciousness with our own energy. So in addition to it impacting our personal lives, it impacts all of life on our planet, not just human life either. So, where does the kind of equanimity that we need to serve the world in a loving way, a way that is persistent but not overly attached to the outcome, where does that equanimity come from? It certainly doesn't come from us saying, I must be imperturbable, I must be calm, I must be loving. Because if our mind and body and emotions are constantly in an agitated condition, then wanting to love is a great aspiration, but it's just a mood. We cannot love from a place of stress and anxiety and where the mind is ill at ease. So what do? We've talked about this before when I've had the privilege of being with all of you, either on Zoom or here live. It is the nature of the mind, of truly of our own existence, that as we fathom quieter and quieter levels of our own awareness through meditation or contemplation or whatever works for you, as we open our awareness to those more silent, more calm state of our own being, then we begin to integrate that experience with our outward lives. In other words, calm, love, equanimity are our nature. And yet, most of us spend our lives living on the surface of life, battling our demons, fighting with the world, but not taking the time to dive inside. And I don't claim to have the right way for you to do that. I've told you before that, and Deborah just mentioned that I'm a longtime teacher and practitioner of transcendental meditation. It's simple, it's natural, doesn't require belief, so it appeals to me. But if you have another way, some mindfulness, something that you feel works for you, that's great. But the critical thing is that we take the time to practice our inward stroke regularly. Now, right away, the question arises, well, wait a minute. If I let go of my attachment to the result, won't that cause me to lose my commitment to whatever issue, in my case, whatever justice issue is important to me? But these are not antithetical. They are what is that word? When they work together. That's the word. Compatible. Thank you. Thank you. They are completely compatible. You know, it's like pulling back the arrow on a bow. If you pull back let's say the target's there, and you see me pulling back the arrow, and you could say, hey, wait a minute. The target's over here, and you're pulling the arrow that way. Aren't you going in the wrong direction? And the answer is no. Clearly, when we pull back the arrow, we gain the energy, the power, the momentum necessary to be effective in action, to be effective in the world. So rather than taking the time to dive deep and to cultivate that silence, we don't even cultivate it. We're just tapping into it. It's already there. So by taking the time to cultivate that silence, to integrate that experience, we actually become, and even though we are simultaneously less attached to the outcome, we are more powerful in creating the result that we want. It's magical. And even though, as I said, it may be counterintuitive, it is the experience of many, many hundreds of thousands of people. And you've had this experience, I'm sure. Something comes up, some terrible problem arises, and the mind jumps into fight or flight mode. And there's all this agitation and chaos in our thinking. We're just not as effective in addressing the problem. That adrenaline rush we get can be useful in the case of physical emergency. But the rest of the time, it is just a distraction and it's counterproductive. I remember once when I was growing up in East Oakland, we did have a small swimming pool in our backyard. And I had a friend over. Apparently he didn't know how to swim. I didn't know that at the time. And he jumped in the pool and proceeded to start flailing around. And I yelled for help. And my dad came out. He had come home from work. He had his bathrobe on, and he still had his Florsheim wingtips on. And I remember Dad, he saw what was happening. He walked to the edge of the pool. He took off one shoe, took off the other shoe, slipped off his bathrobe, swooped in, picked the kid up and to the other side, and after a couple coughs, my friend was fine. But it's that kind of deliberate assessment and decision of what is going to best serve in a situation that he was demonstrating in that moment. And all of us have had the experience, I certainly have, when something triggers me and I'm all agitated and my emotions are up, maybe I'm angry or afraid or both, I'm just not very effective. And I don't know if anybody could say that they are in that. So, how do we stay committed to the cause without being overly attached to the result? And at the same time, increase our capacity to create the kinds of change that we think either we need, our family needs, our world needs. It's to cultivate that, and I apologize for using that word, but it's to, how about this, cultivate our connection to our own inner silence. Cultivate the connection by taking the time regularly to know ourselves. That's all. We're just knowing ourselves on a deeper level. As I said, there are other ways to approach this, and one of them will be the topic of our workshop today. Because what we will focus on is a practice of letting go of our attachments and emotions that really drive our lives to a great extent. It's a practice. But if we want, as they say, the old insanity definition, if doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if we want our lives to be different, if we want to be able to make change, either in ourselves or in the world or both, we have to do something different. And engaging in some form of practice to liberate ourselves from all of this tension that human beings experience. Doesn't mean my life is free of tension, don't get me wrong. I'm married after all, just joking. I'm married to a wonderful, wonderful woman. Obviously, she's wonderful because she's stuck with me all these years. Doesn't mean life will be perfect, but the more we take the time to let go, to liberate ourselves through diving into silence, through learning to let go of the emotions that keep us in a state of agitation and dis-ease. And actually, because of the relationship of mind and body, they can cause dis-ease on the level of our physical body. So for every reason, for our own health, for our own joy and happiness, for our capacity to make the changes in ourselves and in our communities and in our world that we hope to make, for every reason, taking the time to let go, to learn to, because it's a mental habit that we suffer. There are infinite horrors in the world today. Infinite. We had this horrible tragedy in Fairfield last week, where 2 young men murdered a high school teacher. A horror beyond anyone's imagination in Fairfield. And like that, there are horrors that exist throughout the world every single day. So the world is challenging more than ever right now. Climate change is advancing at a horrific pace, and none of the world leaders seem to have the will to do anything significant about it. I don't need to go through the list, but I would caution you not to overindulge in the news, because that'll wreck your life for sure. It's like, what is that? The sobriety prayer. If there's something that we can do something about, and nurturing our own silence and inner freedom does allow us to affect all the world and all of its problems, But if there's something that we can do something about, like there's a homeless person in our community, and we can get together and figure out what that person needs. How can we feed them? How can we provide them a home? That kind of information is useful. But to read about the horrors that are taking place in Taiwan or wherever that we have absolutely no control over. And I'll be 73 next month, and I realized over the course of those 73 years, there is almost nothing that I have control over. Almost nothing. But what I do have control over is my own capacity to love as I cultivate that inner ability, as I practice letting go, and as I stay focused on doing what I can to improve the world around me. And I want to mention one more thing. By sticking together, all of us can be uplifted, reminded, supported. Because all of us will lose our way at one point or another. But to have a loving community such as you all have here at this wonderful congregation, this is so important, at least to me. Your community. We call that satsang, in Vedic tradition. Seeking the company of the wise. And all of you represent that, and all of you can remind one another, let go. Take a breath. We'll continue to do our best, but suffering is not going to serve the cause. So I hope that you will consider joining me for our 90-minute workshop on release, introduction to the release technique, letting go, creating freedom for ourselves. I'm so grateful to be here. With all of my heart, I honor you. I honor your commitment as a community to making the world a better place. And I wish you great success and great joy. Thank you. Say again, Jared? One more time, yeah. Oops. Very good. It's one of my favorite songs. And by the way, Deborah mentioned that I do this fundraiser for our community. Actually, 2/3 of the money goes to our community, and 1/3 goes to Airline Ambassadors, which is an international organization. They train flight attendants to stop child trafficking and things like that. Anyway, it's going to be via Zoom this year on Saturday night, December 11th, and maybe I can get Taylor or Deborah or someone to send out an invitation. And if you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. Okay, thank you. Red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful so pretty in the sky are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. Cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And I think myself, what a wonderful world. Thank you.